Well, a very good morning to you. I hope I find you well. It's great to see you again. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back to the channel. And today I'm going to be looking at something that we did visit probably over a year ago now. And it was my top 10 favourite locomotives from my model fleet. And I know a lot of people do keep asking me on the Monday Club what my favourite locomotives are. And of course, this does change over time, mostly as newer models come out, and there's always something that really does tickle my fancy. So I thought that just for you guys, I would revisit this topic. So come with me, and I'm really looking forward to showing you my top 10 favourite locomotives. Now, I often get asked what are my favourite locomotives in my fleet. And to some extent, this is ever changing because as I get new locomotives, or maybe even my tastes change a little, they do tend to change somewhat over time. And it's been a long time since I last did a top 10 on this subject, so I thought I would revisit it. And looking at the 10 that I've chosen, there are a number of new entries here. We do have a lot of change from last time. At number 10, this is very much a new entry. It's the Hellion Class 16 North British Diesel. This model just has an amazing charm to it. I can't place my finger on what exactly it is about this model, but when I got an opportunity to buy one of these as new old stock, basically Hellion had had an audit in their warehouse, and Rails of Sheffield had ended up with a few examples of some of the liveries of these. So after being out of stock everywhere for quite some time, I was able to pick one up. I was not disappointed, and I'd go as far as saying that I was really impressed with this model. I'd previously reviewed the Class 15, and I wasn't as impressed by that. And outwardly, the Class 15 and Class 16 are somewhat similar, but actually in model form, they were streets apart. And the detail and the quality of construction on this Class 16 model really was something special. So I'm going to put that in at my number 10 slot. At number 9, I think a lot of people are aware that I don't really do post-privatisation, in fact sectorisation as well. I start to lose interest, but there's always an exception to that rule, and here in my top 10 that exception is the Silverlink Class 121 from Dapol. There's something about this livery that really caught my eye. Now, the base model is actually a really great model. I did a review of this in the all-over rail blue, tied in with Hattons. They asked me to review it, and I was more than happy to, and was so impressed with that model that I actually bought the review sample that was on loan. Subsequently, Rails of Sheffield were having a sale, and this livery so totally caught my eye that I decided that it was time to break my no post-privatisation rule, and I bought this, and I'm still not disappointed at that. The locomotive has a wealth of detail, but also different lighting functions, and I really like that innovation with the DCC functionality, which is something which I think all manufacturers should really try and get on board with, because it's reasonably easy to do, and it does add a lot to a model. So I'm quite happy to put the Silverlink Class 121 in at my number 9 slot. At number 8, I think this is one that has featured before, so it'll be no surprise for you to see that we've got the Robinson 8K. This was a National Railway Museum commission from Bachmann at the time that the Robinson 04, known by the Great Central Railway as the 8K, was introduced into the main range, and I fell in love with the pre-grouping livery application. At the time, pre-grouping liveries were few and far between from the main manufacturers, so it really did push a lot of shiny buttons for me, and I was really pleased to add it to my collection. And it's testament really to just how great the base model is that I've subsequently picked up nearly half a dozen of these Robinson 8K later the 04 under the LNER numbering system, 280 heavy freight locomotives, and I'm still not disappointed with any of them. But the Great Central liveried version does remain one of my favourites, so I've got that in at number 8. At number 7, I think Gronks are always on my radar. I have nearly 15 of the Class 8 shunters, and I just love them. There's something about their jaunty charm with the side rods that flail about. I love small shunting locomotives. But when it comes to actually picking which of my Class 8 fleet I like the most, that is something which is a little bit harder to kind of put my finger on which one out of those 15 models is the one that I like the most. Previously, I've always talked about that faded, weathered blue Class 08, the 08507, which was originally one of the earliest Bachmann Collectors Club models, one of the exclusive models that they produced for the club. And I've always put that as my firm favourite amongst the fleet. But this Hornby issued Class 8 in Intercity livery as Piccadilly 08673, with its TTS Class 8 sound chip installation, I think now just pips that. I really am a sucker for the Intercity livery, I'm a sucker for a Class 8, and the sound installation with the Hornby TTS decoder offers great value for money, and in the case of the Class 8, it's actually a really good sound and an easy fit to this model. So I've got this in at my number 7. Number 6 brings in the second of the Hellion models, the Class 25 that has just recently been released, and this D7661 is the model that Hellion sent over for review. Now I also have Tamworth Castle in the ice cream van livery, and I am one who tends to prefer the tops numbered examples, but this really, there's something about the livery. I do like a rail blue Class 25, and the new Hellion model really is a great model. It came in for a lot of unjust, in my opinion, criticism online, but in actually reviewing, handling and running the example that Hellion sent over physically, I have been nothing but impressed. So I'm really happy to add this in as my number 6. Getting down to my number 5 slot, it's starting to get tricky on picking between some of my favourite locomotives, and it has to be said that there's a lot of locomotives that didn't make the top 10 that I do still nonetheless really like. But at number 5 I'm going to bring in the second Hornby model from this set, and this is Duchess of Montrose. It's the most recent version that's been released. There is still, I believe, an even newer version coming out. It's certainly been announced, not reached the shops yet at the time of filming. But I really like this version. It is really up to date in terms of the model. It runs incredibly well. And this is actually fitted with the Princess Coronation TTS sound chip. Again, I'm a huge fan of the TTS sound chips in offering value for money DCC sound. As a child, I had Hornby 00, and one of the big Hornby 00 models was Duchess of Montrose in this exact same livery. So this does push all of the buttons for nostalgia. When we come down to number 4, again, it's getting more and more difficult, but I'm going to bring in the Rails Daypole Terrier. We've got here Box Hill, and this is with the factory fitted sound option, and really that is something very special. If you can get hold of one of the sound fitted versions of this model, they really are outstanding. Now I am aware of course that Hornby have their own super detailed, fully tooled up new versions of the Terrier, but for me the Rails Daypole Terrier does take the edge on a number of points which I brought up in the reviews, and so I'm not really going to go into that in this video, but suffice to say that this model is definitely a firm favourite and makes it into my top 10. Number 3, well, this is again another newcomer into my my top 10. This is Walter K. Wigham in the experimental BR purple livery. I ummed and ahed over picking up this model for quite some time. The reason for that was that I already had 7 A4 Pacifics. Now, that starts to get a little bit silly, and well, I know some people big fans of the A4, and for me, aesthetically, it is one of the prettiest locomotives to ever grace the rails in the United Kingdom. But I did and ah over this, and in the end I decided that if I didn't buy this, with its very, very eye-catching livery, I would forever regret that. And actually, the buyer's remorse has never kicked in. I've nicknamed it Police Chief Wiggum, such is my silliness, but Walter K. Wiggum is a slightly more unusual A4 Pacific, certainly not one that was ever on my radar before, but I was incredibly happy to add it to my fleet, and it is the all-new, fully retooled Super Detail A4 from Hornby, and it is one of the finest models in their range. So I am exceptionally happy to put this model as a new entry into my top 10 at number 3. Okay, so I've cleared the decks a little bit, given myself some more space, and we're now down to the final 2. And I'd be interested to hear in the comments down below what your favourite locomotives are. Which locomotives for you are the ones that, if you could only pick 1 or 2 from your fleet to save, and then, in this hypothetical big fire that you can only grab 2. Has nobody ever heard of big plastic crates or carrier bags? But certainly, what would be the models that you would not be parted from? But for me, the final 2 that I've picked are actually streets apart, completely different eras, in fact separated by decades. And one's a diesel, one's a steam. One's from a completely different manufacturer from the other. And in terms of their operational use on the network, the prototypes really couldn't have been further apart. It took me a lot of umming and ahhing to decide which order to put these 2 in, but I finally settled upon my number 2 as being the Hellion Class 7 Shunter. Now I have 3 of these. I've got 07002, 07010, and finally this example 07009, and I picked this one because I really do quite like the washed out weathered, factory applied weathered version that came from Hellion, and this is the one that I have chosen. Fitted with the DCC Concepts Zen Blue Plus decoder with the Stay Alive, it's also one of my most reliable shunting locomotives, just showing what such an installation can do for operational reliability. Again, it's a bit like that Class 8 shunter. I'm not entirely sure what it is about diesel shunters that I absolutely adore, but this Class 07 embodies that nebulous, aesthetically pleasing thing that presses the right buttons for me. So I've got no qualms about putting this in at number 2. Now, what could possibly be number 1? I'm guessing a lot of you have already guessed, because whenever asked, I always mention the same locomotive, and I believe it was number 1 during the last top 10 video. So no change at the top. We have a non-mover at number 1. And it's La France, the H1 Atlantic from Bachmann. Now, as number 39, this, when it appeared, was a must-have for me. I saw it online, I saw people talking about it, I saw photographs of this, and the moment that I found out that it had hit the shops, I rang up Arcadia Models and said, look, I want to buy one. I'll be driving past there in about an hour. I'm going to pay over the phone. I'll honk my horn. Just meet me outside on the curb and I'll pick one up. I must have this model. And that's how much this model aesthetically reached out to me and said, Jenny, you must have me in your collection. And I'm still not disappointed. I did pick up as well the H2 Atlantic from Bachmann, which outwardly is a little bit similar, very, very similar designs, but there are differences, and I've picked up both in this LBSC burnt umber livery. But for me, this is the top locomotive in my entire fleet. Now, I own around 250 locomotives, and there is a place for all of those. I bought every single one for a very good reason, mostly because I like the look of them. I'm that kind of a person. But for me, this is still the number one in my fleet. Now, do you agree with my top 10? Are there other locomotives that you think that you've seen in my fleet that I should have put over and above the ones that I've put in this top 10? Do let me know in the comments down below, and I do read all of your comments, even if I don't have time to answer every single one, and I do appreciate hearing from each and every one of you. Well, I hope you found this video informative. Don't forget to tickle the like button, share the video too, and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. You can also help the channel make the videos that you want to see by heading on over to Patreon and supporting us there. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying thanks for watching. You take great care of yourself, and until next time, happy modelling. Bye for now. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, and NI Railways 4000 class. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.